Reach into your pocket right now. Take out a quarter or a dime and drop it on a table. What do you hear? A dull thud, a flat, lifeless clink. That is the sound of copper and nickel sandwiched together. It is the sound of cheap money. But if you grew up in the 1950s or 60s, you remember a different sound. You remember the high-pitched ring of real silver. Before 1965, our money had weight. It had substance. When you held a handful of change, you were literally holding precious metal. It was a promise between the government and the people that your labor was worth something real. And that feeling of value, permeated everything we did. Today, we are going to take a long journey back, not just to look at old photos, but to understand why a factory worker in 1964 lived better than a manager does today. We are going to walk through the grocery store, drive the cars, unlock the front doors of the houses we owned, and clock in at the jobs that promised to take care of us for life. We are going to ask the question, what happened to the American dream? Let's start our morning where it always started, the kitchen table. The sun is coming through the curtains, and the smell of Maxwell House coffee is filling the room. Not a fancy latte that costs $6, but honest black coffee brewed in a percolator on the stove. You hear that bubbling sound? That was the rhythm of the morning. You open the newspaper, delivered to your doorstep by a neighborhood boy on a bicycle, and you look at the ads. Let's go shopping. Imagine walking into an A&P, a Kroger, or a Piggly Wiggly on a Saturday. You have a $20 bill in your wallet, just one. Today you might be afraid to enter a grocery store with only $20. You might get a gallon of milk and a loaf of bread and leave with nothing. But back then, that $20 bill was a key to the kingdom. You grab a cart. The wheels are a bit squeaky, but it's made of heavy metal wire. You head to the meat counter. The butcher is there, wearing a white apron that is actually clean. He knows your name. He asks about your kids. You order 3 pounds of ground beef, maybe a pot roast for Sunday dinner. The price, hamburger meat, is 35 cents a pound. You do the math. You've barely spent $1 yet. You move to the aisles. You see the brands that defined our childhood. Boxes of Kellogg's cornflakes, cans of Campbell's soup, jars of Miracle Whip. The packaging was simple. No QR codes, no warning labels covering half the box. Just the product. You fill the cart higher and higher. A gallon of milk for under $1. A loaf of Wonder Bread for 20 cents. Fresh vegetables, potatoes, onions. And let's not forget the treats. Maybe a 6-pack of Coca-Cola in those heavy glass bottles. Do you remember how cold those bottles felt in your hand on a hot day? Glass holds the cold better than plastic ever could. And when you were done, you returned the bottles for a deposit. We were recycling before it was trendy. We just called it common sense. You get to the checkout. The register is mechanical. The cashier has to punch in every price manually, click-clack, click-clack. The numbers pop up on little flags in the window. The total for a cart overflowing with food for a family of 4. Maybe $15 or $16. You hand over that 20 and you get change back. Real silver change. And then the bonus. The trading stamps. S&H green stamps or top value stamps. The cashier hands you a long strip of them. This wasn't just paper. This was a second currency. You took them home and it was a ritual. Sitting at the table, licking the stamps, remember the taste of that glue, and pasting them into the books. It taught us something valuable that seems lost today. Delayed gratification. We saved, we waited, and eventually we took those books to the redemption center and walked out with a new toaster, a set of towels, or even a bicycle. We didn't put it on a credit card and pay interest for 5 years. We earned it. Leaving the store, you carry the bags to the car. Brown paper bags that stood up on their own, not flimsy plastic that tears if you look at it wrong. You load them into the trunk. And speaking of the trunk, look at the car you're driving. It's huge. It's made of steel. And it is the next stop on our journey because in the 1960s the car wasn't just transportation, it was freedom. Now close the trunk of that car. Do you hear that sound? Thud. A solid, heavy, metallic thud. That wasn't the sound of plastic and fiberglass snapping together. That was the sound of American steel. In the 1960s, cars were not just appliances to get us from point A to point B. They were works of art. They were sculptures made of chrome and iron. They had fins that looked like rockets and grills that looked like shark teeth. And they were big. We called them land yachts for a reason. You could fit 6 people comfortably in a Chevrolet Impala, and nobody's knees were touching the back of the front seat. Let's slide into the driver's seat. The smell hits you instantly. It's a mix of vinyl, old leather, and a faint hint of gasoline. It is the perfume of the 1960s. You sit down on that massive bench seat. Remember bench seats? There was no center console dividing you from your passenger. If you were on a date, your girl didn't sit over by the door. She slid right into the middle, sitting next to you. That was the original social network. We didn't need texting. We had proximity. You look at the dashboard. No digital screens. No GPS telling you where to turn. Just big, beautiful analog gauges. You reach out and roll down the window manually with a crank. It took a little muscle. And if it was a hot day, you didn't blast the air conditioning because most of us didn't have it. Instead, you opened that little triangular window at the front. The wing window or vent window. You turned it just right to catch the breeze and blast it onto your face. Why did car manufacturers ever get rid of those? It was the perfect climate control. Now turn the key. The engine roars to life. A V8 engine that you could actually feel vibrating through the steering wheel. And speaking of the steering wheel, it was thin, large, and sometimes slippery. Driving took attention. There were no seat belts holding us back. We slid around on those vinyl seats every time we took a sharp corner. And if Mum was driving and had to slam on the brakes, her right arm would instinctively fly out across your chest to hold you back. The Mum seat belt. It probably wouldn't have saved us in a crash, but it made us feel loved. But let's talk about the finances of this freedom, because this is where the modern world really hurts. In 1964, Ford introduced the Mustang. It was sexy, fast, and desirable. And the sticker price was $2,368. Let's put that in perspective. Minimum wage was around $1.25 an hour. A teenager working a summer job, mowing lawns or flipping burgers, could save up enough money to buy a used car in a few months or put a massive down payment on a brand new one. A car wasn't a debt sentence that lasted 7 years. It was an attainable dream. Young men bought GTOs, Chevelles, and Chargers. They owned the road. Today, the average price of a new car is approaching $50,000. Young people are driving used cars that are older than they are, or they are leasing cars they will never own. We owned our freedom. We held the title in our hands. And fueling that freedom, that was the best part. You pull into a station. You see the sign, Texaco, Gulf, Sinclair with the little green dinosaur. You roll over the black rubber hose on the ground. Ding ding. That bell was the sound of service. You didn't get out of your car into the cold or the rain. A man in a crisp uniform with a name patch stitched on his chest came jogging out to your window. "Fill her up?" he would ask. And you said yes because filling it up didn't require a bank loan. Gasoline was 30 cents a gallon. During price wars, it might drop to 25 cents. You could hand the attendant a $5 bill, fill the tank of a massive Cadillac, and still get change back. And while the gas was pumping, he didn't check his phone. He checked your oil. He washed your windshield. He checked your tire pressure. All part of the service, all for 30 cents a gallon. We were treated like royalty for pennies. And because gas was cheap, We didn't just drive to go somewhere. We drove just to drive. We cruised. Saturday night meant driving up and down the main strip of your town. Windows down, elbow hanging out the door. The AM radio was glowing warm in the dashboard. Maybe Wolfman Jack was howling through the static, playing the Beach Boys or the Supremes. You waved at friends in other cars. You stopped at the drive-in restaurant where a girl on roller skates brought a tray of burgers and hung it on your window. And if something broke, you popped the hood. You looked inside, and you could actually see the ground. There wasn't a plastic cover hiding the engine. There were no computers. If the car didn't start, it was fuel, air, or spark. You could fix it yourself with a wrench and a screwdriver on a Sunday afternoon. A man knew his machine. Today, you open the hood of a car and it looks like the inside of a spaceship. You can't touch it. You have to pay a dealership $100 just to plug in a computer to tell you what's wrong. We lost that connection. We lost that self-reliance. We had the open road, cheap gas, and a machine we understood. We didn't realize it then, but we were living in the golden age of the automobile. And once we parked that car in the driveway, we walked into the biggest investment of our lives in our castle. And just like the car, the American home was something the average worker could actually afford. You pull that massive steel car into the driveway. You turn off the engine and you look up. There it is, your castle. It isn't a mansion. It isn't a sprawling estate with 8 bathrooms and a 4-car garage like they build today. It's a modest 3-bedroom ranch or Cape Cod-style house. It has aluminum siding, a manicured green lawn, and a white picket fence. But the most important thing about this house wasn't the architecture. It was the deed. It was yours. Let's talk about the math, because this is the part that breaks the hearts of the younger generation. In 1960, the median home price in America was around $11,900. By 1965, it was maybe $15,000. Now, think about the average income. A typical worker earned about $6,000 or $7,000 a year. That means a house cost roughly 2 times your annual salary. 2 times. If you saved for a few years, you could put down a solid deposit. If you walked into a bank with an honest face and a steady job, the manager shook your hand and gave you a mortgage. And here is the kicker. You paid it with one income. Mom was inside cooking dinner. Dad was at work. And that single paycheck covered the mortgage, the bills, the car, and the food. Today, a young couple both have to work full-time jobs, side hustles, and maybe drive for Uber on the weekends, just to rent a 2-bedroom apartment in a decent city. We owned our shelter. And because we owned it, we took care of it. Walk up the driveway, do you hear that sound? Whack thud. That is the sound of the wooden screen door slamming shut. Every house in America had that sound. It was the soundtrack of the summer. Kids running in and out. Don't slam the door, Mom would yell from the kitchen. But we slammed it anyway. You walk inside. The house is small by today's standards, maybe 1,200 square feet. But it didn't feel small. We didn't fill our houses with endless clutter from Amazon. We had furniture that lasted. That heavy plaid sofa in the living room. It was built like a tank. It survived 3 generations of kids jumping on it. The dining table was solid oak. Things were built to be repaired, not replaced. But the real magic of the 1960s home wasn't what was inside. It was what was happening outside. Walk back out to the front porch. Look at the neighborhood. Notice something missing. No 6-foot privacy fences. The backyards flowed into each other. Mrs. Johnson's garden merged with Mr. Smith's tool shed. We didn't build walls to keep our neighbors out. We built bridges. If you ran out of sugar, you didn't drive to the store. You walked next door. If you needed a ladder, you borrowed one. And the safety, this is what we miss the most. Do you remember sleeping with the windows open? On a hot July night, the only air conditioning we had was a box fan in the window and the night breeze. We left the front door unlocked during the day. Sometimes we left it unlocked at night. We didn't have alarm systems with cameras and motion sensors. We had a dog and we had neighbors who watched out for each other. If a strange car drove down the street, 5 different mothers looked out their windows to see who it was. That was our security system. It was organic, it was human. The streets belonged to the children. After school, you didn't sit inside playing video games online with a headset. You were kicked out of the house. Go play outside and don't come back until the streetlights come on. That was the golden rule. We roamed in packs, on our bicycles, Schwinns with banana seats and high handlebars. We were like motorcycle gangs. We explored the woods. We built forts. We drank from the garden hose when we were thirsty. And that water from the hose, it tasted like rubber and metal, and it was the coldest, most refreshing water in the world. We scraped our knees, we broke our arms falling out of trees, and we got into fistfights that ended with a handshake. We learned how to resolve conflict without calling a lawyer or HR. We learned resilience. Parents weren't hovering over us like helicopters. They trusted us to figure it out, and we did. But owning a home was more than just a place to sleep. It was an investment in the future. It was the bedrock of the middle class. When you paid off that mortgage, you had a nest egg. You had something to leave to your children. Today, housing is a speculative market for investors. Back then, housing was for living. It was the foundation of the American dream, a dream that felt solid beneath our feet. Now, as the sun goes down and the streetlights flicker on, buzzing with that orange glow, Dad comes home. And this leads us to the final pillar of our lost wealth: the job, the career, the loyalty. Because none of this lifestyle was possible without the unique relationship between the American worker and the American company. While we felt safe in our unlocked houses, we also felt safe in our bodies. Do you remember when healthcare was personal? Today, if you get sick, you sit in a cold waiting room for 3 hours, fill out 10 forms on an iPad, and maybe see a doctor for 5 minutes. But back then, if you had a high fever in the middle of the night, your mother picked up the phone. And who did she call? The family doctor. And he didn't say, "Go to the ER." He grabbed his black leather bag, do you remember that bag? Put on his hat and drove to your house. He sat on the edge of your bed. He used a cold metal stethoscope to listen to your chest. He probably knew your name, your parents' names, and your medical history without looking at a computer screen. He gave you a shot or some pink medicine, patted you on the head, and charged your dad a fair price that didn't require filing for bankruptcy. We trusted him. Medicine was a service, not an industry. And speaking of that telephone Mom used, that was a social network all on its own. It was heavy, black or beige, and it was hardwired to the wall. You couldn't walk around with it. If you wanted to have a private conversation with your girlfriend, you had to stretch the curly cord all the way into the closet and shut the door. And for many of us, we had party lines. You picked up the receiver to make a call, and you heard Mrs. Miller down the street talking about her casserole recipe. You had to politely say, "Excuse me, can I use the line?" We learned manners. We learned patience. Today, everyone is shouting into their own private void on social media. Back then, we had to share the airwaves. We were forced to be neighbors. Sundays were different too. The whole world seemed to shut down. The blue laws meant stores were closed. You couldn't go shopping even if you wanted to. And that was a good thing. It forced us to slow down. We put on our Sunday best. Suits for Dad, dresses and hats for Mum. We went to church, we visited grandparents, or we went for a Sunday drive. There was no constant noise, no 24-hour news cycle telling us to be afraid, no notifications dinging in our pockets. If you wanted to know the news, you waited for Walter Cronkite at 6 p.m. and you believed what he said. The rest of the time, you lived your life. You sat on the front porch and watched the cars go by. You whittled a stick. You played cards. We weren't bored, we were at peace. We were connected by voice, by touch, and by presence, not by Wi-Fi. And that human connection is what built the trust that allowed us to leave those doors unlocked. And finally, none of this lifestyle, the house, the car, the Sunday roast, was possible without the backbone of the American dream, the job. We lived in the era of the company man. Today, the corporate world feels like a battlefield where you are just a number. But back then, loyalty was a two-way street. You found a good company, maybe it was General Motors, General Electric, or the local steel mill, and you planted your flag. You showed up on time, you did honest work, and in return the company promised to take care of you. They called it the Gold Watch era for a reason. You put in your 30 years, and you didn't just get a handshake, you got a pension. Young people today might not even grasp what that word truly means. It wasn't a gamble on the stock market like a 401k that crashes when the economy dips. It was a promise. A guaranteed check for the rest of your life. You could retire at 65 and actually rest. You could sit on your porch, watch the grandkids, and know the mailman would bring that check every month. It gave a man dignity. You didn't need to be a millionaire to retire, you just needed to be a worker. Do you remember the metal lunchbox? It was the symbol of that era. Inside there was a thermos of hot coffee and a sandwich wrapped in wax paper. Men went to work early, built the roads, the cars, and the skyscrapers, and came home tired but satisfied. There was a pride in labor that seems to have vanished. When you bought a toaster, it was made in Ohio. When you bought jeans, they were stitched in North Carolina. We were self-sufficient. We built things to last, just like we built our careers. And because we felt secure in our jobs, we knew how to truly enjoy our time off. The family vacation was a sacred ritual. We didn't fly to exotic islands for Instagram photos. We piled into the station wagon. Dad packed the trunk like a game of Tetris. Mom made a cooler full of sandwiches. We unfolded a giant paper map that covered the entire dashboard, trying to find Route 66 or the Lincoln Highway. There was no GPS voice telling us where to turn. Getting lost was part of the adventure. We drove for hours with the windows down. We played I Spy and counted license plates from different states. We stopped at roadside diners with chrome counters and jukeboxes playing Elvis. We stayed at Howard Johnson's or Holiday Inns, where the sign out front promised air conditioning and color TV as luxury features. And the swimming pool? That was the highlight of the year. The smell of chlorine and coconut sunscreen is the scent of a 1960s summer. We didn't need much to be happy. Just the open road and the family together. So, looking back at the grocery store with the silver coins, the steel cars with the cheap gas, the house with the unlocked doors, and the job that lasted a lifetime, were we really poor compared to today? Modern economists might say our GDP was lower. They might say we didn't have the technology we have now. They point to their smartphones and say, look how rich we are. But ask yourself this. Is a man rich because he has an iPhone but he can't afford a home? Is a family rich because they have 500 channels but no time to eat dinner together? Is a society rich when it has everything but values nothing? In the 1960s, we were rich in the things that truly matter. We were rich in time. We were rich in community. We were rich in security. We walked freely. We breathed easier. We looked each other in the eye. The dollar may have died. Inflation may have stolen the value of our currency, but it cannot steal the value of our memories. We lived through the greatest era of the American dream. And as long as we keep these stories alive, that dream never truly fades. Those are the echoes of America. If this journey back in time brought a smile to your face, or maybe a tear to your eye, please honor these memories by clicking the like button. It helps us share this history with the world. And I have one final question for you. I really want to know, what was the very first job you ever had, and how much was your first paycheck? Write it in the comments below. Let's show the younger generation what hard work used to look like. I'm reading every single story. Subscribe to American Echoes for more trips to the past. Until next time.